So once again, good morning, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here in Monaco. For me, it always feels a bit like coming home. As you already illustrated, Tim, I have quite a lasting connection to Monaco. I spent several years as head of sustainability for Formula One world champion Nico Rosberg. And this place is really full of meaning for me. So when we're talking about sustainability, I think there's hardly a place where conversations get that interesting than in Monaco. Monaco feels stable these days and also thriving. But beyond its borders, the world is anything but certain. We are faced by geopolitical tensions, wars, resource scarcity, and also economic uncertainties. They are all reshaping our global landscape. So here's the question. Can sustainability become a tool for resilience and the positive change that we are all seeking urgently in this world? This is one of the key questions that I would like to discuss with our wonderful speakers here on stage. And this is ultimately not a political question, not only a political question, but also a capital question. And where capital flows, the world moves. And that's exactly what we want to discuss in our panel discussion today. So once again, welcome on stage, Marisa, Antje, and Ole. Ole, I think we need to start with a really very brief keynote from your side. I mean, most of the people already know you, but the ladies already did great and had their warm-up, so now stage is yours. Please, go for it.
Perfect, thank you so much. Well, also from my side, just a quick warm welcome. My name is Ole Nixdorff. I see a lot of faces that I know, so you will most likely know me, but I am also very confident that there will be a lot of people that don't know me. I'm the CEO of the N Group AG, co-host of today's event, and an impact investor based in Frankfurt. I don't want to go into too much detail because we're going to have a presentation later on as well, but I think the one thing that I find very positive, and I would like to thank our team for as well, is I think it's the first panel where I am gender-wise outnumbered, and I think that's a very positive aspect of this as well.
That's true.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. So yeah, let's get into it. First of all, I would like to start with a provocative question. So critics often say that in unstable times, talking about sustainability is really a luxury good. What would you tell these people? Marisa.
I wholeheartedly disagree, because just to the point we were talking about is if you are aware of your risks, whether they be nature risks, supply chain risks, energy risks, this is just a reframing of a discussion about then identifying ways that you can create resilience in times of stress. So if we look around the globe, those who are most affected by what's going on in this shock moment are those who weren't prepared with what we call the Plan B. And the Plan B on the energy side is having a second supply chain for your security, understanding where you can migrate in a moment and pivot. And I view that as just, frankly, good hygiene in terms of, running a business or a company. But so many people hadn't thought about that, and now you have this shock, and then you've got this disruption. So I think the more that you're aware of I'll call it the broader concept of sustainability, energy risk, food security risk, et cetera, it allows you to prepare and be much more resilient in times like this.
What would you add, Antje?
As I just presented, I believe it's all about language and the narrative. And for some reason, and we know all why, the whole topic and the word sustainability has become something that is seen in a very unfortunate way, because the overall idea of acting sustainable means long-term oriented. However, it's become something that is political, something that is en vogue, something that people in your country are not even allowed to talk to anymore. So let's just put that aside. Don't try to fight that. I would say I would rather just change the narrative. Let's talk about resilience. Let's talk about transformation, about the resilience of the economy, the resilience of the financial market, the stability of the financial market, and last but not least, the resilience of our own life. So for me, it's not gone away. Maybe the wording is different, but that's all.
Can I just make one point, though? I do think sometimes you talked about the impact bubble. I'll talk about the Western bubble. Because to your point, I see a completely different picture in our markets. So as I was describing, our bank's beating heart, as we call it, is everywhere but the West. So ASEAN, China, Middle East, and other places. And there, sustainability is not a question of whether or not we're allowed to talk about it. In fact, it is a point of pride. And you touched on a little bit, but you come to my markets and they will say sustainability is a global competitive advantage and it is a point of resilience and security. So the way they would frame a lot of this, the amount of money that they're putting towards sustainability in whatever way you define it, they will say we are financing the industries of the future rather than banking the world of the past. And I think it's really important to understand. I often tell my teams there is an ROW, rest of world, because the media only wants to write about the Western point of view, the sensationalism of all of that, and you get very, very, I think, sometimes caught up in those headlines and think that the world is just what is written in the West. And I just think because these are the highest growth economies, this is where the population is growing the fastest, they are going to be the largest, in fact, already are becoming the largest markets in the world. And you look to them and they're saying, what is going to be the future of my economy, my business, my country, my everything? And they are leading with sustainability as a point of pride.
Thank you so much. Ole, would you say, is this a call for a new definition for sustainability?
Well, I think it depends, because like when you were saying luxury, I think luxury is often connected to economical wastefulness almost, and I think that quite often actually sustainability comes along actually with an economical positive outcome. That when you look at it, because for example, like we are invested in an indoor algae production facility, funnily enough, and I can see the reuse of 90 to 95% of the water as a sustainability initiative, but it actually just is economical, because it doesn't make sense to waste this water and pay for fresh water. I can just recycle and reuse it. So I think quite often economical decisions and sustainable decisions go along with one another. And that is, I think, quite often overlooked. So I don't know if necessarily sustainability needs to be newly defined or needs a new definition. I just think that the view of it on it has to change a bit and get away from this being a luxury and something that costs money into something that gives a lot of economical opportunities, actually, where businesses can make more money than they are doing right now.
Thank you, Ole, and also thank you, Marisa and Antje. Ole, to build on this, on what you've just said, your decisions as an investor and also the criteria that you are using in your selection process when reviewing a couple of amazing opportunities, would you say that they have changed in light of global challenges that we are all facing now?
In a bit, potentially, but we have for quite a long time now looked at, on the one hand, yes, different sustainability criteria, and if those match with what we see as potentially working going forward. But on the other hand, our investments have always been quite massively driven by innovation and by technology that is connected to that. Because when you want to find a sustainable solution and bring businesses or move businesses forward to be more successful, you need to have somewhat of a differentiator, so to speak, to other players in the business. And this often comes with technology or with innovation, be it a process or be it actually a technology. So it hasn't really changed that much. No, we are not now going saying, look, there is this crisis in the Middle East, and we now will invest quite heavily into renewable energy in Germany because there's an opportunity now. Because also our view is a bit more long-term than that. So we're not that reactionary, I'd say, on that front. But I think we generally are more looking into what are long-term drivers, and focus a lot on, as I said, on innovation and technology on that.
Very good. Thank you so much for the clarification. And I think that's also important news for some of the entrepreneurs here in the room, but also for the investors that are having similar thoughts. And of course, we are all facing the same challenges, so sitting in the same boat. Marisa, what would you say can we do, and what is most urgently needed to really unlock more capital for sustainable investments?
Sure, I'll answer that, but I'd love to pick up on your idea of investment themes. I'd like to throw out to the audience a an area where we're spending a lot of our intellectual capacity trying to articulate for the private capital side. And this is this notion of adaptation finance. So much of sustainable investing, 90+% up to now has gone into mitigation. So those investments which reduce carbon emissions for the most part. But if we think about what we're seeing, experiencing, and feeling right now is the extraordinary march of climate change affecting us with these extreme weather events. But away from the weather events themselves, what is happening when these things occur, and they're more and more and more frequent, it is real economic interruption and disruption. Right? It's affecting livelihoods, of course, but it's economic disruption for periods of time while you're dealing with this. So how do you translate that into investment opportunity? And when I started down this path of adaptation finance, don't we need to think about building differently, new products and services that are going to associate with the world that's coming at us? I get a blank stare from the private sector, peers of mine, because they say, well, isn't adaptation government's job? And I say, well, hang on a second, come to my markets. My governments are saying, I don't have money to spend on that. That is an investment opportunity. Why? And I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me. If you have a tech solution and you're looking for a market, that's a lot harder place to find a return than having an infinitely huge addressable market and solving a problem out of necessity. This is necessity, right? Because you can't have business interruption of this extreme value because the destruction is almost incomprehensible. And this is not going away with everything that we're doing to mitigate. It's still happening. So I just want to throw that out there. And if you look at it with that lens, you will find infinite investable opportunities. So to give you an example on a large scale, I just went and viewed a massive energy facility. You can debate whether LNG gas is sustainable or not, because those who don't want to finance fossil fuels will tell you, thou shalt never touch fossil fuels. On the other hand, if efficient gas is in many cases supplanting coal in the developing world, and that is substantially less decarbonizing. But aside from the facility itself, when I went down to visit this facility, they have this gigantic wall that's the height of this building that they pile drive down into the ground to protect this gigantic infrastructure facility. And when I asked them, why are you doing this? Their code says to build for a once-in-a-100-year storm. Now, this is a $1 billion infrastructure investment. They're saying, guess what? The once-in-a-100-year storm is happening every 6 months. I am building to a 500-year storm code. Now think about the investment opportunity in whoever is making this barrier wall. It's a necessity. And it's going to happen more and more and more. Built environment, look at the goods and services that are going to need to be created to withstand extreme heat or wind or whatever. That is a massive investment opportunity. Why? Because it's out of need. So think about that as a concept that you can invest behind. We're not calling it sustainable. We're calling it adaptation, which is non-controversial even in the U.S., because that was a U.S. Facility that I was touring in a very, very red state. So interesting, right? Anyway, so you want to jump in?
No.
Go, please. And then
about
I can
to
answer
ask
your
Antje
question.
anyway.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you.
And then I can come
Thank you
back
for
to your
that.
specific question. But I just thought, while we're on this topic, I just think as an investment community, these are places where I would highly encourage you to take a look.
Wonderful. Antje, we are now calling also for your insights. What we've heard, many important elements: systemic change, infrastructure, long-term thinking and acting as well. What would you like to add? Do you share the similar mindset, or also from your perspective, representing the asset owners here today?
That is exactly what I tried to say. And as you said, adaptation is the new word. Maybe we should all only use adaptation from now on, because that implies also the return opportunity. One of the things that I've just read is that the Strait of Hormuz, which is now closed and which will be probably closed a couple of more days or weeks, is not only holding back energy supply, i.e. oil, it's also holding back a massive amount of fertilizer which is produced in the Middle East. And these fertilizers are used in Western agriculture. So then we think, wait a minute, why do we ship fertilizers from the Middle East to Western Europe And now we don't have any, and now all the farmers in France are just going completely berserk because they don't see any kind of supply for fertilizers. Then the first thing, and you don't have to be a farmer, you don't have to be an economic, it's easy. Why don't we create fertilizer in Europe? Why don't we change the way we do agriculture? And here we come to regenerative agriculture. So that's the way of doing farming that we as humans have been doing for hundreds and thousands of years. We just unfortunately changed that in the 1950s. So in that way, we are trying to find solutions, or we have to find solutions to adapt to climate change, which not only happens to Asian countries, but also happens to Western countries. And you know, the size and the severity of these climate events that is happening in California or in Germany, like the Ahrtal catastrophe, is now putting new people at the table that say, oh wow, that's really a lot of money that was lost. So we really have to do something against it, not only to avoid it. We cannot build walls around the river of Ahr. It's just not possible, so we have to adapt to it. And therefore, this kind of adaptation is the key idea, is exactly what I was talking about, is this risk mitigation, and at the same point, how do we mitigate risk? We have to find solution to adapt to it.
How can we exactly accelerate this?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello, hello?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm back. So how can we exactly accelerate these kind of improvements that you have all just mentioned? Because I feel that we as human beings, it always has to hurt, first of all. We always need to be really emotionally touched. But really, is there always this painful moment that we need to experience before we really take action? I mean, you are really the front runners and one of these pioneers in the sector, but what is your take on this, Ole? What can we really do to be even more proactive in this?
I mean, also in relation a bit to what Antje said, I found that there's a bit of a disconnect almost, because as you mentioned, like if we're looking at Ahrtal, for example, if I'm an insurer and I am the one who had to pay hundreds of millions for houses that have been destroyed, I would think about how can I invest to avoid this in the first place, or to mitigate this in the first place. So I think there still is a bit of a disconnect, because I don't think that is happening, at least not from that sector, enough at the moment. But at the end of the day, and this is kind of where we most likely are a bit different to the rest of the market, is I think this is a topic that is becoming closer and closer to private capital as well, and that is also like smaller investors, let's say, so not necessarily people that want to invest tens of millions, but that want to invest 50,000 euros, 100,000 euros. And that is kind of our approach as well with the product that we have developed, to say, look, we want to make investing in impact, sustainability, adaptation, however we want to call this, accessible to everyone and interesting for everyone, because kind of this is something where everyone plays a part and where everyone is at the end of the day impacted positively or negatively. So I think private capital will have to play a massive role here, and that's kind of what we are trying to drive and move forward.
How can I be involved, for example, very concretely?
Well, you will see later in our presentation, but we have issued a bond that everyone starting at 1,000 euros can invest in, and that we then invest into different portfolio companies and have built a portfolio of different impact investings.
Very good. So looking forward to your speech then later. What I would like to really highlight as part of our conversation is, and I mean, Antje and also you, Marisa, you have illustrated that as part of your keynote sessions already. But could you summarize in your words, where do you see the most attractive investment opportunities on the horizon at the moment? Of course, when speaking about impact investing, Marisa, please.
So back to, I think, my thesis, which is born out of necessity will create absolute return opportunities. So if you follow where those pain points are, and you can look at it with an industry lens, or you could look at it in a geographic lens. You can also look at it in an event risk lens. So maybe touching on the 2 points, because you asked what's keeping capital. History does repeat itself. I've been lucky to have built many asset classes over my 40 years in banking and capital markets, and they somewhat follow the same pattern. Back to my original conversation about the blue economy, we were talking about this. This was an anathema to private investors. It was uninvestable sector, and yet now look at those numbers. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. So adaptation is a similar theme. So number one, we need to define the market in return terms, because again, there's this perception that somehow this is throwing good money after bad, or there's no return to be generated. My view is, again, if you have to buy these services, there'll be a massive return. So maybe you can just take one example. So if I look at it with the event-driven risk, California wildfires, since you touched on it. Okay, so where could a large capital provider play, and where could a smaller investor play? Large capital provider says, okay, what is the problem here? We've had this massive event, and the tagline is, California wildfires are uninsurable. It's an uninsurable risk. Now, if you think about that, what are insurance companies supposed to be doing? Insuring risk. Anything can be priced. What's happened is, because it was such a shock, they exited in many cases. But actually, if you look at what solves the problem, technology is a wonderful instrument. We have geosatellite technology that is so good right now, it can look at a span of a forest and tell you with precision the line of what is susceptible to wildfires and what is not. So instead of what we call throwing the baby out with the bathwater and say uninsurable, how about looking at that technology, which is necessity? Because if you are the municipality in that area of California, what happens? If that's an uninsurable risk, everybody moves or doesn't rebuild, the tax base goes, it's a disaster. So there is a wonderful investment opportunity, because somebody's going to want and need and going to use that technology. And you could play this out into any one of those weather events. You could do it in floods, you can do it in agricultural degradation. There is incredible technology now that, again, geosatellite with precision that can tell you in a 100,000 hectare farm which shoot, not which hectare, which shoot needs more water, more air, more this, more that, more fertilizer. And so you can precision farm now and use infinitely less resources, or you can use regenerative farming that doesn't need, and go on and on and on it goes. So that's where I would point, is these areas of pain points, and I guarantee you will find a really interesting investment opportunity at large scale if you are a bank that wants to finance better practice, and that can be in the hundreds of millions or capital markets trillions, or you could go into venture capital and everything in between.
Very good. So it's really about transparency. I mean, you mentioned the technology that is really a lever to accelerate these kind of topics.
Let's start with where there's a problem, that
Exactly.
you need a solution that needs to be found,
and making it measurable to manage things properly. So that's
I think maybe just to add on that, because what we also see with investment opportunities that we get at times is that people are trying to create problems to solve
Yes.
with what they are doing. And
Yes.
I think this is very much
The wrong
like
way.
away from what you should be doing. There's so many things that need solution and that need solving. And there are a lot of problems that you can address. And I think that is what you have to really focus on, and go and solve the problems that are already existing, and don't try to create new ones to solve those, even though this is happening a lot around the world.
wonderful. Antje, do you feel we have missed anything when talking also about your perspective with the asset owners, the challenges they are facing, but also the bright outlook that is on the horizon? Is there anything that you feel we need to highlight once again?
I would just like to focus again on the system thinking idea. You know, if you decide on any kind of investment, you have to think about what kind of influence does that specific product or a specific technology has in the system. Oh, now? Is that better? Yeah? Okay. Again, so it's all about system thinking. And if you are, as Ole said, don't try to create new problems. There is enough problems. And as now we can see, there is enough risk to be mitigated and adapted. One thing that I always stress with everybody I talk to is the need for scalability. So create a new technology which requires a huge amount of labor, which a huge amount of humans to actually steer it, doesn't get any kind of scale somehow. And in order to change systems, in order to really tackle the big global challenges, we really have to focus whatever we do on the solutions that are scalable. And how do we create this scalability? First and foremost, early stage investors give these kind of chances and really, you know, make the idea technology come to life. But then the next step is, I think, even more important, to find the scalable solutions. And one of the solutions that I would always stress is work on solutions that answer a very clear need of the traditional economy. Because sometimes our wonderful impact bubble tries to focus on impact ideas, and they don't. Is it working? Yeah. Okay. On impact ideas and very special impact technologies. And I always think, talk to the real, to the traditional economy. They are there, and they are the ones who actually scale all of this. So they should be part of this. They should be part of the community. And thanks to this new risk framework, they will be, because they have to consider new technologies to mitigate their own risks. So get the big companies on board. And last but not least, get the big asset owners on board. And there, for them, we need new investment structures. We need new investment solutions, again, in the fixed income sector.
I would have a tip if you want to think about scale, is also look at where policy enablement is happening. Because if you have a technology and you need it to scale, to get to true scale economics at a country level, and I think about this in the energy transition, you know, when a country says, I want my energy mix to shift from X to Y by X date, or we are going to put a sunset on petrol vehicles in a country, by definition, they are giving that signal of scale, and it's a have to have, not a nice to have. And then, surprise, surprise, you have that adoption rate just, you know, explode, and then you get to true scale economics, and then you don't need policy anymore, because the scale economics make it cheaper to have the adoption than to stick with the old, and then, you know, it all takes care of itself. And we've seen that pattern over and over and over again, and we're there in electric vehicles in emerging markets where, you know, you have a far better car that is cheaper for the mass market, and it doesn't need petrol, or, you know, and we know it's happening in wind and solar with the massive cost curve reduction.
Thank you so much. Really, I very much enjoyed the conversation with you, and I feel it's still a starting point. So I think we are all up to continue this conversation with all of you later on. And what a privilege, anyway, to be in a room full of entrepreneurs, financial leaders, and investors. So let's really use this opportunity, once again, as a starting point to talk about these important issues and not just be too negative in the challenging times that we are all facing. But I think exactly the pitches that we will be hearing afterwards and the best practices, they are really our biggest hope. And we have the power really to allocate capital wisely. And this gives me not just hope, but this gives me confidence that we are a great group of people here. So let's really utilize this momentum of this event today and turn capital into impact and impact into lasting change. Thank you so much.